want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of The Best Movie You Never Saw, and this week we're taking a look at the 1986 cult classic FX, starring Bryan Brown, Brian Dennehy, Diane Venora, and Jerry Orbach, directed by Robert Mandel. In this, Bryan Brown plays Rollie Tyler, an ace special effects man toiling in grade D slashers who's approached by the government to help fake the death of a mafioso played by Jerry Orbach who's entering witness protection. After successfully pulling off the job, he finds himself marked for death by his former employers and wanted by the police, with only a ragged cop, played by Brian Dennehy, believing that there may be more to the case than meets the eye. To get out alive, Tyler's gonna have to rely on his wits, but he also has an ace up his sleeves. FX. Now, FX is a little different from most of the movies featured in this column in that it was a success. According to articles from the time, no one expected much from this movie despite good test screening results and a successful premiere at an early version of the Sundance Film Festival. It opened in the spring of 1986 and picked up good word of mouth, eventually grossing $20 million, which was pretty good in 1986 for a movie with no real stars. As the executive vice president of advertising at Orion Pictures said in a New York Times interview, "We had to accept the title because the producers were very keen on it. They thought the two letters together would be provocative, like MASH." Again, it's an awesome title, so chill out, buddy. On VHS, FX was a huge hit, and I vividly remember an old video store I went to as a kid that poached their very name from the film's title and used the poster as kind of a company logo. It was successful enough that the movie actually spawned an okay sequel, FX2, which grossed just about as much as the original, but the studio behind it, Orion Pictures, went bankrupt soon after its release. They sold off their library to MGM, so eventually we got a horrible Canadian TV show based on it, and then nada. Although Hollywood's been flirting with remaking it for a while. Despite this relative success though, audiences nowadays that maybe missed the old days of VHS probably haven't heard of FX, so I figured this would be a good excuse to revisit a movie that I absolutely loved as a child. Now, FX is a lot like the TV show MacGyver, in that the hero relies on smarts rather than brawn to get him out of trouble. The hook here is that an FX guy is framed and has to clear his name, and that's a pretty good hook, I have to say. Fans of old-time practical FX work will get a huge kick out of this, especially in the classic climatic action scene that has Brown's Tyler pulling out his bag of tricks to do battle with some well-armed baddies. It's worth noting that the producers, including Dodi Fayed, who was infamously killed in a car crash alongside Princess Diana, pulled out all the stops, hiring a legit FX guy, John Steers, who had worked on Star Wars and several 007 films, to consult. Bryan Brown, who at the time was having a very solid run as a leading man, makes for a likable lead. Think of him as an older, less polished Mel Gibson, with him using his native Australian accent to great effect.
Michael Corleone went to Sicily. What happens to me?
You are 100% protected, I give you my word.
Furthering the idea that Tyler is totally out of his element. He's vulnerable, but also tough, and by the time the conclusion rolls around, you know that he's more than a match for the baddies who, I must admit, are a touch generic. Probably the guy who benefited the most from FX, however, is Brian Dennehy, who plays the tough older cop who's a lot smarter than he lets on, and is really about the only guy that's just about as clever as Tyler, maybe more so. Dennehy actually became an unlikely star after this movie, and it's easy to see why, with him effortlessly carrying a good chunk of the movie on his own, as they periodically leave Tyler to focus on the crooked investigation that's setting him up to be the fall guy. Brian Dennehy, of course, passed away last year, and I miss him. He was a really great leading man for a while. If FX is worth seeing at all, it's for the amazing finale, and for the sake of spoilers, I'm not going to dig into it too much, but there are some really cool scenes where he's using all these neat FX trips to foil the baddies, and it's pretty cool. It's worth the price of admission alone. You gotta check it out. Now, FX of course is out on Blu-ray, but can also be found on some streaming services. And I have to say, it's a strong character-driven actioner, although despite Hollywood's eagerness to remake it, I would think it would be a little bit hard because they'd have to use CGI if you were actually making a film about the special effects industry, and I can't imagine them using CGI in the plot, not a thriller like this. I mean, you really need the practical effects, so in some ways FX, unfortunately, is just a film of its time. While the tricks they show, however, are antiquated at this point, FX holds up really well, and the sequel, although not quite as good, is still worth seeing just for Bryan Brown and Brian Dennehy alone. Check it out, it's worth a watch.
If you're lucky, as I was, and you work hard, as I did, and you get pretty much what you want, which I just was able to do, then what if you got the bet? You know, it ends at some point.
Thank you for watching The Best Movie You Never Saw. If you like what you see, please subscribe to JoBlo videos. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive the latest notifications for all the latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all your support.
And the days they will go